Welcome. I guess that's just getting kind of easy. You know, it's 5 o'clock. Yeah. How many of you went to the Art Institute? You know nothing starts on time. Right? It's 5 o'clock. You got Art Institute time. We just wait around for 20 minutes, right? But no, it's recorded somehow. It's live streamed, so be on your best behavior, and that's going to be most of you for a long time. Well, welcome to this thing. I mean, this has been a blast for me to be part of this. Uh-oh. Ooh. Hang on. Oh, I could use the microphone. Yeah. Let me sit down and use the microphone. Oh, God, that's way welcome. This is a pleasure for me to be here to be part of this, and it's nice to see a bunch of alumni faces that, you know, I don't recognize faces, and my dad with names too. So, you know, I wish everybody had name tags. You know, you look like the right crowd to me. So it's great to be here. I wanted to thank a bunch of people from here, from the Museum of Sonoma, to Karen and Lana, who can't be here today, and Jennifer and to Jen, who helped me help set up all this stuff today. So thank you. And especially to Jude Mooney, who put together the exhibition and curating this exhibition. And even though the title of the show is Unruly, some of the artists that I'm going to delve into here who are not in the show are not that unruly. Some of these earlier ones, I mean, you know, maybe they were strapped by just their time frame when they existed, but, you know, it goes back a while when you realize, I got timed out somehow. Oh! And look who's here to help.
You all good?
I'm not good. But I'll be happy to. I'm on slide 91. Oh, there's the last slide I'm going to show you guys.
And the first.
And the first one, I guess. I'm usually really good at this. There it is. Okay. So I think I got really lucky in figuring out the title for this thing when, you know, from Russian Hill to Russian River and beyond, because I throw in, there's some people who you got to include, and I don't know the boundaries exactly. Because I really did my best to expand the geography as much as I could, as these artists didn't move around. And I also wanted to plant the seed that Russians could be coming from any direction these days. They did once, and it could happen again, so be prepared. Now, believe it or not, the very first faculty member at the school, Virgil Williams, was a Sonoma artist. And he did indeed did paintings like this, Knight's Valley from the slopes of Mount St. Helena. He had a studio here, and he hung out with those people that hung out in Sonoma in the 1870s. He did this one, A View from the Sonoma Hills, looking south toward Mount Tamalpais. Other early artists from the school that ventured to Sonoma included this guy, Lorenzo Palmer Latimer. You know, they tended to use all three names sometimes. And his painting of what is probably the Bohemian Grove along the Russian River, as a lot of these people were part of what they thought was Bohemia. And another one of Latimer's Russian River Redwoods. By the middle of the 20th century, an influx of surrealist artists arrived at the Bay Area, including people like Gordon Onslow Ford, Lee Mulliken, Wolfgang Pollen, and Lucita Hurtado, all located near the artist Gene Varda's Vallejo ferry boat at Sausalito's Gate 5 in that houseboat community. And all of them, to one degree or another, were attached to the people and had friends at the Art Institute. Also included were other friends and artists like Christo, who actually was married to Gene Varda for a blip. And when you look at her transcript, you see this note in there that says, well, she's decided that she can learn more from Gene Varda than she can't come into the school. And this is a time when Ansel Adams was at the school, and David Park, and Claire Falkenstein, and all the rest of them. Evelyn Kent hung around with this same group of people in Marin. Filmmakers like Frank Stoffaker, plus Alan Watts, and the avant-garde composer Harry Parch. So it was a multidisciplinary crew that had brought this surrealist era to Marin. A few years later, the beatnik bohemians arrived at the Arcs near Larkspur, where Wallace Berman hosted exhibitions at his roofless Semina gallery in an abandoned ark, and where the artist George Herm sank a sculpture which still resides in the murky depths of Corte-Madera Creek. So, let's find that thing. He's alive, so we can probably track it down. One of these fellow travelers of that beatnik world, in that North Beach beat era art world, was filmmaker Lawrence Jordan, a longtime Sonoma resident, Petaluma, and an esteemed filmmaker and faculty member at SFAI. Here is a 1974 film crew in Mendocino County for Jordan's 16mm feature, The Apparition, which he wrote, directed, and produced, and shot. And there he is, front left there. He looks tall, even sitting in a chair. A compilation of his animated films, the Lawrence Jordan album. Note the blurb by Jonas Mekas. These films are among the most beautiful short films made. And they truly are. And a really nice photo capturing Jordan at the 1975 SFAI commencement. You'll recognize the quad there. He's with the honorary doctorate recipient that he probably suggested, Linwood Dunn, who did the special effects for King Kong. I once tried to coax Lawrence into returning to teach at the school after he retired. He said he would like to do a class, or even one class that he did that was in the sculpture department, where he had students making boxes. And he had worked with Joseph Cornell making boxes. And I sort of thought, God, I don't remember you doing this class, but I can't believe they didn't, get you in that department to keep doing that all the time. By the middle of the 1960s, there was a solid group of SFAI artists at Muir Beach. Shown here are filmmakers Gunver Nelson on the left and Bob Nelson, both of whom were key to developing the SFAI film department in the 70s and into the 80s. We had just been given these photographs for the archives, which is this very nice set of things from Muir Beach, which happens to coincide with a documentary film that was made at the same time about these artists in Muir Beach. One of Gunver Nelson's many notable and very important films is My Name is Una, of her daughter riding a horse along Muir Beach. And Gunver Nelson in the mid-'80s with fellow film faculty member Janice Lipson at SFAI. I think Janice is here. Oh, there's Janice right there. Janice has grown her hair out. And please check out Janice's work in this show. Another very important member of that Muir Beach art community was the photographer John Collier Jr., who had studied at the school in the 1930s, was a New Deal photographer with the Farm Security Administration, and a revered photo teacher at SFAI. On the right is John's retirement party at the SFAI cafeteria in the early 1990s. And some of John's FSA work. A photo of John showing New York City's Grand Central Station. Oops. Wow. Just too nervous. Collier was instrumental in educating a new generation of anthropologists with his groundbreaking book, Visual Anthropology. Another Muir Beach neighbor, the artist William T. Wiley, who was a student at the school, California School of Fine Arts in the 1950s. Here he is at a ceramic sale in the Diego Rivera Gallery. Wiley was also a filmmaker, painter, part of San Francisco's mime troupe, and later an incredibly influential teacher at UC Davis. And always fond of his alma mater, doing this poster for the school in the 1980s. It's a beautiful poster which you just get lost into with the SFAI and always, and the ancestors' blood and the towers on there with FRE. Wow. Oh, jeez. Okay, now here we go. I'm going to be more patient. Just over the hill from Muir Beach was another group of artists that lived at White Gate Ranch along the Dipsy Trail overlooking Stinson Beach. Here is the Shaw family with Richard at the wheel of the truck he still owns, Martha and kids Alice and Virgil. Richard and Martha went to this school in the early 1960s. Alice studied photography in the 80s, and you'll see Alice's beautiful and fascinating photographs that are just behind you on that side of the wall. And Richard's, he not only went to school, but he taught there for over 20 years in the ceramics department. Here are his students from 1986. Anybody in there? Any?
Yeah, I know. That's funny.
God, there are library workers in there. And then one of Richard's pieces, which you can also see here at the entrance. There are two pieces of his here. Richard on the far right and Martha on the left in the tuxedo with their soapbox derby car entry from the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's 1975 Artist Soapbox Derby. These artists really did have a wide range of skills. I'm looking straight at Richard Albert at the moment. Yeah, if I needed some carpentry done or a door on, I think I know where to go just in case. Three friends, Hudson's, Jack Stuppen, and Shaw. These North Bay artists hung out together, creating their own community. A group show of three of them, Shaw, Hudson, and Jack Stuppen, all had studied at SFAI, and all who did very different kinds of work, as you can tell from this catalog. Another set of Bay Area artists, the Sonoma Four, again, with Jack Stuppen on the stoop, and William Wheeler on the left, Bill Morehouse with the beard, and their non-SFAI friend and fellow painter, Tony King. These artists gathered to do plein air paintings. Jack Stuppen's Bodega Head from 1990. Bill Wheeler's Bodega Head from Irish Hill, he titles it, from 1990. And Bill Morehouse's Bodega Head from Irish Hill, 1990. Morehouse was the eldest, a student at the California School of Fine Arts, and then later a teacher at the school, followed by a long tenure as a faculty member at Sonoma State. There's this wonderful story, which is, some of you alumni probably heard variations of it, but it's true. He was a student when Duchamp was visiting the school in 1949, when the Western Roundtable of Modern Art included people like Gregory Bateson, and who wound up teaching at the school, and Frank Lloyd Wright, and Duchamp. And Duchamp wanders through and he looks at what Morehouse is painting and says, you know, son, what are you doing? And he shrugs his shoulder. Morehouse shrugs his shoulders and said, yeah, I really don't know it. Duchamp just nods and says, keep up the good work. That's a plan. No more over intellectualized than that. Morehouse was students at SFAI with the assignment on the chalkboard there, draw what you see, feel, and hear. You know, included in the band that's playing is Sonoma Marin artist William T. Wiley on guitar there in the front left, and you can see the profile of Wally Hedrick there, who's on banjo. And of course the guy in the sunglasses, that's Charlie Strong, and Morehouse on the right. A 1960 landscape by Morehouse, which is only about 6 inches by 4 inches. And a Morehouse painting from 1992, Spring Green Valley Road. And Bill Morehouse's Sonoma Flyer sketch for his 1975 soapbox derby car. He probably, if they were timing people, he probably could have won that. I do get confused sometimes as to where Marin ends and Sonoma starts, and I always thought maybe this was one way to tell, was with Christo's running fence. Christo and Jean Claude's running fence. But it did meander back and forth, I think, through Marin and Sonoma. Somebody here, I'm sure, knows. But it makes it a bit easier to distinguish the two sections of California. But I'm not sure any of these artists care one way or the other where that boundary really was.
Marin County is where it went into the ocean. It only went through Marin County for a short distance. Mostly it was in Sonoma County. I was one of the original workers when I started my career.
Were you really? Well, that makes sense. And I always thought it truly was really close to the line. And then I thought, shit, I can't say that if that's not true. These people live here, and you worked on it.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I better look it up. And I thought, okay, maybe it'd be under back.
I was actually there when they did. There was an illegal move to go into the ocean, and I was part of the crew that was rushed onto a bus before the Marin County sheriffs arrived to arrest us all.
Yeah.
We just made it across the border back into Sonoma County when they showed up.
Well, all the more reason to do cross-county border artwork that could be somewhat under suspicion by the authorities. Here's the dog's eye view from Sonoma by one of your local artists on the running fence. Wait, I missed a picture that I have to show you. This one. Because this was while doing running fence. Christo did come to the Art Institute and he gave a lecture, and I think he was trying to find people to work on it, people volunteers to help, and he was trying to advocate as much for it as well. But here he is on the right, being grilled by the legendary faculty member Dick Fiscus, who I hope some of you know. And if you look at Fiscus's face there, he's really reading Christo the right act, and Fiscus lived in Marin too, and so he's probably thinking, stay out of Marin, put it in Sonoma, keep out of Marin. But it looks like, Fiscus was giving him the evil eye there. And Dick was the dean of students, and also he wound up being a very successful painter on the sly, kind of, and never would announce that to the painting department, I don't think. But and on the left is Arnold Hurstan, for any of you who witnessed that little time period when Arnold was president of the school. And our dog's eye view. The school's photography students were well aware of the art happenings in Sonoma County as early as 1946 when they arrived. But this is an photo essay that they did of the Pond Farm workshops in probably 1952, when it was truly the Pond Farm workshops. These beautiful photographs, and these are in the archives. We have a set of these in the archives, and all researchers, it seems, are interested in this from all sorts of different angles, whether it's the craft aspect of it or whether it's the photography. They're wonderful photographers. Myra White was involved with it, and a guy named Charles Wong, who was probably our oldest living alumni, who passed away last year at 101, who was just this wonderful guy from San Francisco. He studied in the 30s and then came back and studied photography. And your dad was
My dad went in the 40s, and I remembered him.
Is that right?
Yeah. My
Yeah.
dad was in the photo department in the 40s.
Well, they knew how to print photographs, and these are the way that they did these is they dry mounted them into this book that was cataloged, and we had not interleafed it. And like Sandy Phillips, who is a retired photo curator from the museum, was looking at something the other day, and we were sheepishly, thinking, my God, I think I was a much better librarian than I am an archivist. And I've got the failings are certainly showing, but I need to work more on it. One of the people who was at the Pond Farm workshops was also a teacher at the Art Institute, Trudy German-Prez. How'd I do? But she was one of the artist residents during that Pond Farm workshops period, a textile artist and a weaver. And she had taught and gone to Black Mountain, and she was recommended, there are letters in the archives from Joseph Albers and Annie Albers recommending her to teach at the Art Institute. And here she is. She winds up teaching a year or two at the Art Institute, and then she goes to CCAC when it had the extra C. And a gathering at Pond Farm workshops in the Hexagon House, all dressed up and ready to talk creativity. Bernice Bing, known affectionately as Bingo, came of age in Northern California when racism was rampant, lesbian was a bad word, and women were expected to be housewives. As a student at the school, she exhibited at the Avant-Garde Batman Gallery. She was reviewed in Art Forum magazine and worked as a cocktail waitress at Vesuvio's and the old spaghetti factory. Bing moved to the North Bay, I think first maybe in Napa, in the Mayacamas mountain area, and this is one of her paintings of the Mayacamas Mountains. And then she later spent the rest of her life in Philo up in Mendocino. I also love this abstract version of Velázquez, Las Meninas, or Las Meninas. But it's just, like when you see it, and you realize, wow, she really was paying attention to, probably not Dick Fiskus, but somebody who was teaching her history. And there's a drink named after her in those bars called, what is it called? I think it might be called a bingotini. So it's some sort of martini. Wally Hedrick made his way from Pasadena to Russia Hill to go to school there in the 1950s. Along with this group, he started the student-run Six Gallery in San Francisco. This is Deborah Remington and Jack Spicer, who actually was their teacher, and John Allen Ryan and Wally and Hayward King. I think the person missing is David Simpson. But the gallery showed people like Jay DeFeo, Joan Brown, Manu Neri, Bruce McGaw, etc., and was the venue where Allen Ginsberg first reads Howl. And one of Wally's paintings from that period called Metropoliticians. And Wally was a long-standing member of the Studio 13 jazz band that had begun in the 1940s with David Park and Elmer Bischoff, Douglas McCady, and others. And here's Wally on banjo on the right with his SFAI student from the early 60s sitting in on guitar.
It's like Jerry Garcia.
He was Gerald Garcia when he was a student and as a teenager at the Art Institute. But that's Gerald, so this is Gerald Garcia sitting in with. There's an article that was written by a cultural historian at San Francisco State about Jerry Garcia being influenced primarily by Wally Hedrick. And if any of you know Wally Hedrick, it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. And so they always did continue to hang together and play together. Wally moved to Marin, as many of you probably know, and then to Bodega Bay, as noted in the Press Democrat, this Press Democrat article called Wally's World, where it says, where he enjoys bodega solitude. And the beat goes on for artist Wally Hedrick. And then Wally's side gig is Fix-It Shop. And he brought his athletic skills to the North Bay. By the early 1990s, Richard Diebenkorn had relocated to Sonoma County. Here he is in his studio. Diebenkorn called the view of Mount St. Helena from his front porch my Mont Sainte-Victoire, or La Montagne de Cézanne, after the famous peak Cézanne painted in Aix, France. And so there's his view. And there is Cézanne's painting, another version of Cézanne's painting. So he truly had found his Cézanne landscape just outside Healdsburg. And some of Diebenkorn's marvelous work from this time in Sonoma. Not color corrected, unfortunately, I don't think, for this, but and his studio. Franklin Williams, a longtime resident of Petaluma, studied at CCAC, where he was not excited about, I guess, some of his abstract expressionist paintings. And so in the early 60s, he took these paintings to the Bay Bridge and threw them off. Wow. He pivoted to more collage-y, multi-media kinds of work, and yet still very painterly, as you can see behind him. Like this piece titled, "They Tried to Button Me Down, But I Found My Way," from 2019. Acrylic and collage on canvas, crochet, thread, beads, and buttons. Fabulous. And this piece titled, "Professor Emeritus and His Teddy Bear." Bill Geis received a BFA and an MFA from the Art Institute in the early 1960s, and then taught at the school in the 70s and the 80s before moving up to Sonoma or Mendocino County somewhere. Geis was one of the youngest, if not the youngest, ever recipients of a Guggenheim Fellowship. There's this in the one of the roll books in the early 60s, and I can't remember what class it was, and I meant to take a picture of it, but at the bottom in red, it's written, "Bill Geis is allowed back into class." And you know, where's the backstory of that? Because if anybody knows, we can do some moral history, but. And one of Geis's sculptures that is owned by, that's in the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's collection, called Green Snake for Lucas. And this was purchased with funds that were generated by that artist, Soapbox Derby. So it's a very small world that the art world existed in. This is one of his 3 feet by 3 feet paintings with urethane, titled "Again Begin," from 2008. These are gorgeous. I'd love to see these things. I only have seen them online. I wanted to make sure to mention 2 artists who studied at the school and who've left their mark on Sonoma County, but did not live in Sonoma, to my knowledge, and thus you can call them noted intruders or respectful artists in residence. But here is the lovely Bobby Stoffaker with her super graphics at Sea Ranch, who, it really is, as somebody who, she studied painting with David Park when she was a teenager at the Art Institute, along with other painters. They had a design program at that time, but she studied design stuff elsewhere in Switzerland, I think. But she always thought her real creativity and her real grounding within the art world that she existed in as a designer came from being around the Art Institute. And she just passed away last year, but it's very noted in that world. If you go to this SF MoMA right now in that lobby on the 2nd floor, there's this huge, all the work is hers. She'd kill me for this probably. The decoration is hers. Luckily, she's not around to kill me, but she probably would slug me. And she actually was, I mentioned Frank Stoffaker as one of the filmmakers early on who was with those surrealists. He was one of the filmmakers with James Broughton and Sidney Peterson and others in that early avant-garde period. That she married Frank Stoffaker when she was probably a teenager, and then he passes away, so she was a widow at a very young age, and then she winds up marrying an architect named Solomon. And Benny Bufano, another artist who certainly left his spot in Sonoma County with this piece, Peace Obelisk, Timber Cove, but somebody who really did hang around the Monkey Block and Montgomery Street in San Francisco. And finally, 2 wonderful artists who kind of retired to Sonoma. And yet I have known plenty of artists who retired from teaching or driving a cab or construction or whatever, But I don't think I've ever known an artist who stopped making art, who stopped being an artist. So they continue on, and I'm sure enough, she did too. This is a self-portrait done by Pele Delat, who had studied at the Art Institute in 1930 with a guy named Arnold Blanche. She was a very good friend and a sketching partner with Frida Kahlo, and they shared a studio space on Montgomery Street in that monkey block where the Trans-American building is now. She was a good lefty and artist and political illustrator and a teacher at, I think, the labor school, who continued her strong work till the end of her life. This piece is titled The Working Press. And the other wonderful artist who moved to Northern California in her 60s, but it was for the last 40 years of her life too, she lived for almost 100, was Dor Bothwell. Now, maybe Dor Bothwell doesn't really count in this from Russian Hill thing, because she studied at the school before it moved to Russian Hill, when it was still on Nob Hill in the early 1920s. She also taught at the school. She, after she went to school, she traveled to Samoa. And here's a self-portrait of her that shows the tattoos that she received when she was in Samoa. She taught at the Art Institute for years, and I remember photographer Purple Jones, who had her teaching, who taught color theory, and he said, as well as Carlos Villa, that, she would always show us her tattoos to show, a variant of in the art world. Returning from Samoa, she returned to that studio in the Monkey Block in the where the Trans-American building is. And when Henry Matisse visits San Francisco on his way to Tahiti, he stops in to see his old friend Ralph Stackpole, who had taught at the school for years and was a key person in the art world of 20s, 30s, 40s San Francisco. But Stackpole has a banquet for Matisse in the 700 block of Montgomery Street, and the building is still there. And so Dor Bothwell shows up to explain to Matisse what he's gonna fall into when he goes to Polynesia. And I'm not sure Matisse ever got a tattoo. But at one point she dances for Matisse. All the people who spoke French sat on one side, and people who didn't speak French would sit on the other side. And she continued to do this as again, a multidisciplinary artist who did dance as well as, but she really was known for this wide range of work like this, noted for the surrealism, like in this self-portrait. And you can see her work they have her work in that permanent collection of things at the museum now that's in this room that's labeled surrealism, but then there are things in there that really aren't surreal at all, but they're kind of, maybe, should be in the next room over. But. By the time Dor Bothwell makes her way to the North Coast, she is doing pieces like this. This is a painting called World Underfoot. It's from a series, and this one is Underfoot Mandala, and it's a painting of a manhole cover on the street outside the monkey block. So she's giving her nod to her early studio work in San Francisco, even though she's up the coast. I could probably have more. I could have had a whole different set of people, I'm afraid, and it would be just as interesting, because these people are really fascinating, as many of you know. So thank you very much for
Hi, I'm Estelle Rogers. I'm the chair of the board of the Museum of Sonoma County. I've met a number of you over the past few months. And I wanted to welcome you. First of all, I'm a little late because Jeff just started, right on time. That's unheard of. But I wanted to thank you. I wanted to thank you all for coming and recommend that you go see the next building over as well. We've got lots of other fun stuff going on here. But I've been a big fan of this exhibit, the concept of this exhibit from the beginning. And I now see, a whole other set of artists. We knew there was a very rich universe to choose from, and it was very hard to choose, according to Jude, and I'm totally a believer. And we're glad you're here. One of the greatest things about this show has been making a lot of new friends from the SFAI alumni, and we're very glad you're here, and we hope you will come many times more. Thank you.
Any questions, or comments, or corrections?
Do you have any material on Jerry Belaine?
I think we do, but it's probably pretty minimal. You know, we have these artist files, which were put together for the last 60 years probably. A guy named Harry Mulford, who worked in the library in the 60s and into the 70s, put a lot of stuff together. And so there are clipping files and files that have ephemera. And I think Jerry Belaine, I mean, is a name that certainly I recognize as somebody who was attached to the school. So there must be an artist file. And then there's always contextual material, like, you know, the college catalogs, commencement things, photographs, and roll books. And we did receive the transcripts that date from the 19-teens through about 1970. That had always been in pretty deep storage, and I thought these would just be taking up space, and they do take up a little bit of space, but not very much, but they can be really, really fascinating. For instance, there's a set of students who came from the Native American school in Santa Fe that were recommended to go to the Art Institute by the same teacher that had recommended Wiley and Allen and Hudson to go to the Art Institute about 10 years earlier. And there's great correspondence with them about everything from, you know, their draft status to, you know, what kind of government kind of attachment they would have to the reservation. So there's good stuff there. Yes.
So Jerry Garcia's real name is Jerome, not Gerald.
Oh, it says Jerry. I'm also,
Jerome.
you know, I'm gonna look. I'll look. It might be Jerome. You're
I know
right.
it's Jerome because I'm Deborah Garcia, I'm his widow.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well,
I got my MFA in art student film. Started there in 1979, and actually was there at that whole concert.
were you? Yeah. That was a good one actually, because that was probably in 1995 or so. I think.
Yeah, got time for
Yeah, as I think about it, I was confusing Jerry Burchard, because his name appears in roll books as Gerald all the time. And so I just transposed it, but thank you very much for the correction. Because you're right, because that looks pretty funny too, when you see that. You go, oh, no, that's not, that can't be him.
Yeah, you're a good expert.
But please come by sometime. We'll pull that out for you, because it is sort of a nice little oddity. That's, you know, I mean, it's historical, it's primary source, it's everything else, but it's pretty incidental. And I hope you're familiar with that article that was done in Boom magazine about Wally Hedrick and Jerry.
Well, I'm not familiar with that.
Oh,
but I'm fine.
I'll send you that.
Yeah, I like that. Would be fun.
Did you study with some of those film people that?
Yeah, I was George Kuchar's assistant for 2 years.
Great.
In the studio film, it was Riot.
Wow. Yeah.
And Ron.
Yeah. There's somebody else.
And I think I was Janice. She was your assistant for a semester. And I taught one class. I taught one day a week. You taught every day. And there were students from every continent, literally, in that class. They were undergraduate. And it was so fun because your assignment was to go out and film blah blah in San Francisco. And they would come back and they would each see San Francisco from their own vision. It was fascinating. It was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I was scared, but I did it.
Oh. Yeah, that department was, I mean, it's hard to single out any one department sometimes, because all of them seem to be like, wow, that's just solid with a wide range of people that all put up with each other doing different kinds of things.
It was fun.
It was fun.
And also there was we saw lots of films. There was history of art class that I took. I knew a lot about art. I'm not sure who taught that, but that was really wonderful. And then we saw a lot of independent films from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Some of them just were, I mean, one of them was great. They were great. They were so different because I'm interested in dramatic films. But it was so wonderful to see all those, and to see just film language being developed by artists. And it was just really, really fun. And the class, when the studio film with George, I mean, everybody in there was an artist. You know, they were committed to being an artist. So there was the fun of making films, and then they had all these costumes and wigs and makeup. And he had a book from the 1950s called, there were television plays, and there was one called One Night a Week. And you know, this family, we never see each other, so the new rule is we all have to stay home one night a week. You know? So they did, and you can imagine what went on in that one night.
Yeah, there's James Broughton was teaching a film history class at one point. We have his syllabus and you know, the list of films that he's going to show.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, it's just so revealing, and you realize, God, that's education.
Yeah.
With a capital E and a D and a U and the whole way. But, you know, George, it was always such a wonderful day on a Friday when you crossed paths with George, and it just kind of made your day always.
It's great because a lot of filmmakers back then were so serious, and they didn't believe in having, some of them didn't believe in having music or sound, you know, it's just the film. And George was all about everything all at once. And
Yeah.
You're going to have a good time, we're going to have fun, it's going to be good. And he was he was a kind of a genius in a strange way. But
there's a story that John Waters tells about reading. He says, when I open up the newspaper and see the new MacArthur Awards and George Kuchar's not on it, I know they're a fraud. Even something like that. And yeah, that's true. George Kuchar should have had one of the early ones. But he could do it all. He could produce, direct, screenwriting. He was a great cartoonist.
yeah, and get everybody into a fun, you know, creative meetings.
I would wear these around hoping you would cast me as the wayward librarian, but I never got in there.
Shove in there, you have to just shove in there. Yes.
Well, thanks for the correction. God, that would have been terrible not to be corrected on that. Jerome. Okay, what other corrections? Well, thank you very much, everybody. That was really fun. Thanks for your comments. And come visit us in the archives. They are located in the basement of Crown Point Press, just across Howard Street we're on Hawthorne, right at Hawthorne and Howard, right across from the Howard Street entrance to SFAI. Well, yeah, they're mass transit, they're underways, but still.
When you come from here, you have to park there.
Yeah. Yeah, Nelly, yeah. We